Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gamer.biz Weekly Roundup, your source of the most relevant news in blockchain games. Today is Friday, the 5th of May, and I am your host, Jenny Jordan, and with me today is co-host John Jordan. Hi, John.
Cheers, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Sunny again today.
So. Right, let's get into the news straight away. So this week we saw the Sui mainnet go live, and it had 13 games being announced to launch on like a rolling basis sort of thing, and those would start being rolled out on the 15th of May, including RPG Final Stardust by Comet Labs, another RPG, Project Illusion by Ravent, I think that's how you say it, and Mobile Move to Earn game Run Legends from Talufa Games. What else can we say about this launch?
So a bit of background, I guess, on Suni. So the company behind it, Miston Labs, is one of the two projects to come out of Facebook. So certainly was years ago. So if we can remember, years ago, Facebook was sort of interested in blockchain and had this project that went under various names. One was called Libra, and then it became DM. And they had these internal teams working on this blockchain, and they were thinking of sort of doing a stable coin, and they were thinking about it more about a payment system, I think, rather than a sort of a smart contract blockchain that you could run games on and stuff. But anyway, they had this internal project, and as is sort of the case, US regulators got very excited by this in a bad way. So Facebook obviously was going through all this stuff with like data and being too powerful and making too much money, and everyone hates Zuckerberg, and then you combine blockchain into that, and just basically US regulators basically their heads blew off. So Facebook, to be fair to them, did try and get it through. They did sort of put all these privacy things in and did say how they were going to run their stable coins and blah, blah, blah. But eventually they just sort of gave up, and they had other things to worry about. But they had these internal teams at Facebook, and then they sort of split out, and they split out into these two teams. So one is the Aptos blockchain. It's been out for a while now.
Okay.
And I think there's a few games have been announced for that. But it's not. I would say it's not had like a massive impact. I wouldn't say it's sort of something everyone's raving about. And then Sui's come out now. So the mainnet went live, as you say, this week. The sort of token's gone live for people to sort of, if you want to buy it. Not investment advice. I wouldn't recommend it. And then they've done this announcement about games. And that's in a sense sort of interesting, because Aptos didn't really do that. They didn't, as far as I can see, didn't have a formal like we're announcing these games. And Sui has, I think, always been a bit more game focused. I mean, there's some people there. Well, one person there that I know who's doing sort of A&R for games. I mean, she's worked at Google and stuff, and she definitely knows the market. And they have some other people who are sort of trying to source games for their blockchain. But it's as far as I can tell, they did this announcement with Dean Takahashi on GamesBeat, who wrote sort of quite a long article, sort of covering a whole bunch of different stuff. And as part of that, he announced these 13 games that were going to sort of be coming out in the next month or so. But it was because it wasn't coming officially through them. It was coming through his sort of article, his exclusive interview with them. You're never quite sure exactly the positioning on it, because he's obviously it's not an official sort of source. He's putting his own sort of spin on it to some degree. And his sort of spin was, look at all these high quality games coming out for Sui. And my sort of spin on it was, what are these games coming out for Sui? So yeah, and and I think that I have to sort of temper my enthusiasm a little bit to sort of call it out. But having 13 games coming out is quite a lot. And it's not quite clear if these are all completed games. Certainly, some of them that I looked at, sort of their websites and stuff, said this is we'll put out a demo, but the full game's not coming out till say 2025 or something. So there's always this sort of issue with blockchain games is what does it mean to be live? It's something we debate sort of quite a lot. If you have NFTs live, is that a live game? Well, probably not. But if you have like a closed alpha for NFT holders, is that game live or not? Well, obviously sort of elements of it are, and even games that are live might say, well, we've got this mode's live now, but the land I mean, you can say with Axie Infinity, it's been out for 3 years and still the land NFTs, are not live in the way they will be at some point. Anyway, so
talking about Axie. Oh, sorry. Yeah, let's
no, you
not
go
go
ahead.
off track. No. I was thinking about when the announcement of those new games on the Ronin blockchain, the third-party games,
Yeah.
came previously this year, and sort of your take has kind of been that it's better with fewer, more quality projects. Do you think if you would compare this announcement to that was sort of a better,
Oh, that's a good question.
maybe better
That's a
thought
good
through?
question. So Ronin announced their sort of 5 launch games, and again, I would say there was sort of a slightly underwhelming angle on that. The different thing with Ronin, obviously, is it's a blockchain that's got Axie running on it, and so a number of those games were sort of games that were sort of using Axie in well, one of them was using sort of Axie, and they, I think they have a slightly different approach in the sense that they've already got an ecosystem up and running with a big game on it that has people using it and a bunch of assets. So in a sense, they don't need a massive big sort of splash to say, look at this amazing game coming to our blockchain, come to our blockchain and play it. So, and for them, actually, they had this game called the Machines Arena, which was sort of the surprising one. That's a PC sort of MOBA game. And I've actually started playing again. It's a game that's out now, but no blockchains in it, so you can download and start playing the Web 2 version of it. And actually, I'm not a massive fan of MOBAs. I mean, they're technically quite complicated, team-based competitive games. Not the sort of game I'm good at. But actually, it's a game. It's not. I wouldn't say it's the highest quality game in the world, but actually, it's quite playable. So I've been playing a few. They have a death run, sort of endless, or you go for as many levels as you can before you get before you get shot. And that's actually, as a game, it is technically a pretty solid sort of top-down shooter. And it has all the things you sort of expect. So there's always that sort of thing when someone announces a game and you sort of not had a chance to play it yet, then it's sort of quite hard to judge. So I think actually the Ronin, from the announcement on Ronin, which I was a bit underwhelmed by, I've sort of I've mocked them up a bit because I've played their sort of headline game. I've played it and think it's actually all right. With this Sui stuff, I guess the thing that jumped out at me, there's 13 games there. The vast majority of them, no one will have heard of them. I've not heard of them, and obviously, I don't know every game out there, but obviously, me and you spend quite a lot of time looking at blockchain games, and just the majority of those games were just like titles that had never been heard of before.
Yeah.
So that could be like these amazing secret games have been sort of been working in the background, and now they're revealed for this massive Sui launch. But when you look at them, they're sort of like sort of unheard of developers, and maybe okay, maybe not, but it's not like, oh wow, that game looks amazing, I've got to check that out.
Yeah.
And the three games that were announced, the 3 games that were known entities were Cards of Eternity. What's it called? Cards of Eternity, which is already out, and I mean it may not be on. So it's already out as a sort of Web 2 game through the Epic Store and the Ultra Store as a PC trading card game. They've originally announced they were on Immutable X. I don't know if they're still on Immutable X. I think they do have assets live on Immutable X. So it looks like they're on both. So that's a game that's sort of already out. And then the other 2 were the Project Project Ilu, and Panzer Tanks. And those are projects that have had NFTs live on Solana for over a year. So those were Solana projects that it's not quite clear if they're still going to be on Solana or whether they've moved to Sui or whether they're going to be on Solana and Sui. But either way, that sort of slightly dilutes the fact that look at our launch lineup, and 2 of the games you've actually heard of are actually sort of have NFTs live on Solana, and I guess that's sort of in the long term, that's the balance for stuff like for a web blockchain like Sui. So without getting too technical, Sui uses this programming language called Move for its smart contracts, which is basically the bits of code that run on the blockchain. And Solana also uses Move, and also Aptos also uses Move. So I'm not a programmer. Basically, programmers will say Move is a much better language than Solidity, which is what all the Ethereum blockchains use, because Solidity is sort of old and it's sort of a bit sort of crunchy, and bits of it are not actually all that well structured. But basically, it means if you made a blockchain game on Ethereum or an EVM blockchain, then you basically have to totally rewrite it to get it to work on these on Solana or Sui or something like that, because it uses a totally different programming language. So basically, it sort of means in that sense, sort of, it's very hard for Ethereum-based projects to move to Sui, but it's very easier for Solana-based projects to move to Sui. So I imagine what will happen is a whole bunch of Solana projects that are probably not doing that well at the moment, because Solana obviously is particularly struggling. So there's probably some low-hanging fruit there for Sui to sort of like say, you were working on Solana, we'll give you some money to come over to Sui, and we're exciting new blockchain, blah blah blah. But equally, I think every platform, when a new PlayStation comes out, everyone's very excited about what are the launch games, what are the new experiences. So I think there is, while Sui can sort of fill up their slate of new games with stuff from Solana or sort of slightly unheard of games. Really, what you need is sort of one or two, sort of quite sort of a high concept, interesting games from well-known game developers that may not come, till the end of 2024. Those, as we all know, those games take a long time to make, the high quality games. But I think that's sort of what I would be looking for, to sort of show that they understand how the games market works. And as you said, the games market is about fewer high quality games that come out when they've had the proper development time. And sort of anyone, and I think one of the general criticisms that you could have the blockchain game sector at the moment is there's hundreds of games coming out there, and they're all pretty, at best mediocre, a lot of them, and they've sort of not been rushed out, but they're sort of, people have to release stuff because they've got tokens live and NFTs live, and the longer they don't release it, the token price goes down. And so at the moment, I don't see Sui really leveraging, any differentiation from what's already out there. And as I say, how many blockchains are out there? Whatever. I mean, 50 or more than 50, but 50 have some sort of games on it. And, to be up there with, say, Polygon or Immutable, or, the ones that do have sort of momentum around the project is, I think you need something to sort of stand out. So maybe that'll come. Netmarble has said it's doing one of their big RPGs. I can't quite remember the name because it's a bit generic. And they've said they've got 30 developers have signed up. So maybe in 3 months' time, we will have forgotten this sort of launch, this sort of slightly underwhelming launch lineup, and there'll be some really hot stuff happening. So, and as I say, the whole slight issue here is this was something that GamesBeat put out rather than Sui saying this is our launch strategy. So it may just be that I'm slightly, my tail is wagging, and the dog. I don't know what the metaphor goes there, but I know. I'm getting too wound up with this little nugget of information. There's actually a whole bunch of stuff down there, because as I say, there are some sort of serious people in the games team at Sui. So I would sort of be surprised if this is the best they can sort of cobble together.
Well, we'll certainly follow it with excitement. See
Absolutely.
what's happening now. Okay, so moving on, the South Korean game studio come to us also announced two new blockchain titles: Ace Fishing Crew and Minigame Party Pocket Edition. They're both mobile games, and they'll be running on Come to Us blockchain XPLA. And these are sort of games coming out of their already existing IPs. Is that right? Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, I mean, sort of a continuation of the previous conversation, really. I mean, Come to Us, like many of the South Korean games companies, I feel has sort of jumped on the blockchain bandwagon, and for better or worse, their view has sort of been, we're sticking blockchain into all our games, whether yeah. I mean, so I sort of agree with the basic premise that South Korean games companies go, blockchain's the future. I would say that, wouldn't I? But going back to the sort of fewer, higher quality, take your time. Pretty much every South Korean company I can see is going more. Don't care about the quality, quick. So, I mean, so Come to Us has, to be fair, it's probably not the worst sort of example of this. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. We made, did they announce 100 games or something? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Someone did, and you get and maybe there is a business strategy which is basically stick blockchain into all the games, throw them against the wall. One of them's going to stick, and that's the way to do it. I guess maybe that will work. Who knows? But it's sort of my sort of experience in the market so far is this stuff is really hard to do, and it's really easy for it not to work, even if you sort of try hard and think about stuff. If you don't think about stuff and just like throw it at the wall and see what sticks, then my sort of gut feeling is you've sort of ruined 100 games and none of them stick, and it's.
But it's kind of funny because you hear that from a lot, or that sort of um, thinking or something similar from a lot of developers, and then actually what it seems like gamers out there want quality, they want narrative, and they want fun, well thought through games and ideas. They don't actually want 100 and maybe one
No.
will scale. So there's a bit of a disalignment there, isn't it? And
Yeah, and it's sort of like those two particular projects. One's like the Ace Fishing franchise on mobile has been pretty successful. People like fishing games, so that's sort of a known sort of franchise. And while I'm sure if you sort of sat down and said, right, we're going to make a fishing game using blockchain and NFTs and tokens, and I'm sure you could craft something, but it's not, it doesn't immediately jump out to you as like, and I think blockchain can go into every game, but it seems a bit odd. And the other one is like a mini game. Again, it's a continuation of an existing franchise that's been fairly successful for them. And in some ways, adding blockchain to sort of a mini game sort of collection sort of does work because it means people are playing all these games, and but one NFT might sort of work. NFT characters they may, which I don't know if they're doing this, but if you had an NFT character, then that might give you sort of different power ups in different games, and you're collecting tokens across them all. One token would go working different ways across them all. So there's lots of people doing that sort of thing, but again, I'm not quite clear that this is really how it's going to work. And again, the other sort of high level thing, which again maybe it goes back to Sui, is all these South Korean companies have all created their own blockchain or sort of their own blockchain infrastructure that maybe is a sort of scaling solution like a layer 2 or something. So again, I sort of think there may be sort of business reasons to sort of feel like we have to own our infrastructure and we can make a much better user experience and we can run our own tokens much easier on our own blockchain. And but I do kind of wonder if maybe they would have been better off just using something that's already out there, or because it just means, for this XPLA blockchain that they've got, it means you sort of have to create your own wallet for that, and so that's just another sort of friction system for people, and it's just sort of layer upon layer of sort of decisions that I don't think sort of quite add up. Which maybe I'm being too negative, but we'll see.
Okay. Turning to maybe a bit more of a positive note, and you had a look at Epic Games Store this week, and you could count 18 titles that have got blockchain listed by the platform. And as you say there had been some reluctance in the CEO, Tim Sweeney, about blockchain, and Epic Games hasn't got any of their own blockchain titles yet. But would you say this could be a sign of the Web2 market starting to sort of give in to the power of Web3, kind of realizing that it's an inevitable progression of the games industry? And
I'm not quite I don't know. So Tim Sweeney is the CEO of Epic Games, and they've sort of been quite clear that they're not doing any blockchain stuff in their existing products. Obviously, Fortnite being the sort of the big one. And he sort of is. I don't know. It's a bit unclear to me. So sort of publicly, he said stuff around NFTs are very scammy and blah blah blah. But I've been talking to people who know him, and they're sort of saying, well, he says that on the he says that publicly, but that he knows blockchains are the sort of the way that's going to happen. Blah blah blah. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I'm told. So I think generally, I could sort of make a case where maybe probably Fortnite will never have NFTs in. I think it's very complicated to build it into existing products, but maybe Epic Games won't be doing any blockchain stuff for 5 years. Let's say, but for them, I suppose the Epic Game Store is for them is about distributing PC games, and for that business to work, you sort of want to have as many games in there as possible. because that's sort of how you get your cut of money. So when you're running a store, like a digital store like that, there's no business, there's no sort of business model, there's no business reason to go apart from at a quality level to say we wouldn't have more games. I mean, that's sort of the opposite from what we were saying with Sui. Distribution stores want as much in there as possible. So I guess from that point of view, unless they think sort of NFT and blockchain stuff is sort of criminal or really super bad, or they're sort of very against it, then there's no reason they wouldn't let it in. And I guess particularly in this case, because Steam, which is their competitor from Valve, has explicitly said no NFT games on Steam. Then for Epic Game Stores, whether you sort of are interested in NFTs or not, allowing NFT games into your store just immediately gives you an advantage over your big competitor. And Steam is much bigger than Epic Games, so I can sort of see from just a pragmatic point of view that they would just sort of go, they wouldn't allow gambling games in there because they think gambling has all this sort of law stuff around it. But NFT stuff, let's try it out. Let's see what happens. Maybe we differentiate ourselves from these crypto bros sort of thing, and they'll start using our store, or maybe actually make a ton of money for it, and maybe we actually get some interesting learnings because we can start to see maybe games with blockchain in them have maybe they're not downloaded a lot more, but maybe there's tons more retention, and so it's sort of useful in every regard that they would sort of do that. I guess the interesting bit more generally is I've sort of always sort of looked back to, I always sort of check to see what games are in there, and Blanco's Block Party was the first one to go live, and then slowly it's been sort of building up. But I was quite surprised it had got to like 18. And most of those games are not live, so in fact, very few games are live. I think there's Blanco's is one, Cards of Eternity is one. There's the core games sort of platform. There's maybe a couple of others, but most of the games say coming end of the year or something like that. But then some of those games actually, like the Machine Arena, which we just mentioned on the Ronin chain, so that's available there. And if you can get a code from their Discord to actually download it. So even though it's not available for most people, if you get a code, you can actually download and play it. And there's Superior from Gala Games has a similar thing. I think if you have the NFT, you can do that. And Metalcore as well is another game that it says they're coming at the end of the year, but you can get a code from them to sort of play it. So there is a sort of a stealth thing going on there, whereas there's a lot of games. 18 games is not that much, but it's interesting to see those games coming out there. But people, sort of the community, can now download those games if they go and get the code, even if the general public sort of can't. So it is more interesting than just these games that will be at some point. And again, these are big PC games. These are what would be considered if they didn't have blockchain, they'd be considered sort of interesting traditional like Metalcore is this big mech shooter thing where you can drive around these big tanks, or you can run around as a soldier, or you can fly in an airplane. I mean, it's sort of just games, and obviously these ones have been in development for a while for blockchain, and I guess that's sort of they're the ones we're looking towards as sort of breaking new markets, and equally without going back to Sui again, they're the sort of ones where if Sui said, oh, we've got Metalcore as our lead launch game, then people go, oh, that's one of the better blockchain games out there, that's pretty cool. But
so quickly then we're gonna try to come to a close. We have been looking at the monthly data of most popular blockchain games in the industry, and we use the data there from that radar. And at number 1 is Alien Worlds. It keeps on taking that top spot. It runs on Wax. Well, this is in terms of on-chain activity.
Yeah.
And then number 2 is Splinterlands, which has gone down. It's dropped as low as 50,000 daily wallets. And the Planet, how do you say it?
Planet 9.
Planet 9 on Polygon, which we've seen the biggest change. That's dropped from around 100,000 daily active wallets in February to around 10,000 at the end of April. That's a big drop. So do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess to some degree, we're in this sort of uncertain sort of market conditions. So it's not certainly not. You would sort of be surprised if a lot of games were sort of increasing their audience. I suppose because there's not this is not a time of sort of enthusiasm. So I mean, Alien Worlds has been Alien Worlds and Splinterlands have sort of been traditionally been the number one games in terms of on-chain activity for like a couple of years now. Partly because they have a pretty much everything you do in the game is an on-chain transaction, so they just have a lot of activity. If you're playing the game, you sort of show up. So the interesting bit, I suppose, is Alien Worlds has sort of just continued around 200,000. It's probably down a bit from its peak a couple of years ago, but Splinterlands has really come down a lot now. I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. It did have a big drop last year when it changed its reward structure to try and it sort of it made it more. You got more rewards, sort of the more cards you had, and the sort of the higher quality you've played. And the thinking was that removes some bots, but this doesn't look like when that sort of thing happens, you get like an immediate drop. This looks like it's sort of a gradual decline. So it may just be people sort of churning out of games, which does happen. So we'll see. Again with Planet 9, that was I've not played it to be honest, but that was a game where like a bit like an Alien Worlds where you're sort of a mining type game. So it seemed to have a very big jump up, and there was some people I was talking to had some suspicions about the number of bots in there. So it may just be blockchain games typically see like if they're growing, then they have a very fast growth curve because everyone starts piling in to see if there's money to be made, and then if there's not money to be made, then it sort of drops down again quite a lot. So it seems like that's sort of what's happened there, which is not to say it's not a good game, but it's maybe the growth curve was a bit driven by market forces. But in general, there's not really much going on in terms of sort of new games with on-chain activity, and I guess as we sort of touched upon thus far, there's a lot of games out there at the moment, but actually quite a lot of them are in these sort of closed betas where actually they're not really on-chain games. They're sort of people are now testing a lot more of the sort of basic on off-chain gameplay before they start adding NFTs in and all that sort of stuff. So there's just not that much really, and it's not. So I've been writing that sort of monthly roundup for like I don't know 3 years or something, and it's just like not a lot of new games in there. I mean, there's Alien Worlds and Splinterland's been there for ages. I mean, Axie, what's it called, Upland, sort of games sort of come in and out again, but there's not very much sort of having sustained levels of play. And I guess that's the thing that blockchain games have just not proven really at the moment that they can sort of sustain. Well, I say with the exception of Alien Worlds and sort of Splinterlands, but at a very low level compared to non-blockchain games.
Yeah, and that takes us into the game of the week. And I've been playing the Korean RPG Xeno Dragon. That again, like you just said, but it's a game that has got NFTs will become available. It's not on the blockchain yet. It'll be on the K Stadium ground chain.
Which we've never heard of before. To be fair.
No, that's right.
We don't talking about South Korean companies and weird blockchains. I mean,
they're a mobile title available on the app stores, and it's quite a classic Korean style dragon battle. Narrative-driven game, which is a completely new genre to me. And I basically managed past the first mode, adventure mode, and into what is it, arena? No, it's not arena mode. It's the second one. I mean, dungeon mode. When you face up with a beginner, you have to level up and you have to follow the tutorial pretty attentively. And I guess I didn't do that. So, but it's enjoyable. Cute little dragons, and you can foster them. You can gear them up, and as you progress in the game, they level up. You can also, this will be available as NFTs then to buy dragons and to buy gears for the dragons, and that will obviously help you to do better in the game. So they're developed by the N-Step Studio, South Korean team with a lot of heavy gaming veterans. So check that article out on our website.